is a civil right. Gay, straight, black, white. We're men and we're women, not the marriage.
Will uphold the will of the people.
Good or bad, history is being made.
Equality! It's now in the hands of the Supreme Court.
A landmark case tonight, both sides of the debate, the arguments, and where we go from here.
Complete Bay Area news coverage starts right now. This is KTVU Channel 2 News.
Good evening, I'm Ken Wayne.
And I'm Julie Hayner. This is a special edition of KTVU News. Historic arguments on a polarizing topic as California's 9-year tug-of-war over same-sex marriage reached the nation's highest court.
Tonight, we go in depth on the Prop 8 case. We begin with KTVU's David Stevenson live in Washington, D.C., where he witnessed the oral arguments from inside the court. David.
Ken, that's right. I sat in on this historic hearing on same-sex marriage and witnessed some powerful displays of emotion inside and outside of court. What's unclear now is what the justices will do next.
Same-sex marriage made its way to the nation's highest court in a burst of pride and protest in the streets outside the U.S. Supreme Court.
We're men and we're women.
Inside the court, the 9 justices heard arguments on the constitutionality of California's Prop 8 same-sex marriage ban, a case Justice Anthony Kennedy described today as a trip into uncharted waters. Prop 8 attorney Charles Cooper took flack after telling the court marriage traditionally has served as a vehicle for procreation.
Suppose a state said, because we think that the focus of marriage really should be on procreation, we're not going to give marriage licenses anymore to any couple where both people are over the age of 55. Would that be constitutional?
No, Your Honor, it would not be constitutional.
Theodore Olson, the attorney for same-sex marriage advocates, sparred with one justice over the history of marriage and when gays and lesbians became excluded.
I want to know how long it has been unconstitutional.
I don't. When it seems to me, Justice Scalia,
it seems to me you ought to be able to tell me when. Otherwise, I don't know how to decide the case.
I submit you've never required that before.
The court asked some penetrating, measured questions of both sides, and now it's in the hands of the court.
Attorneys for both sides said they hope for the best, but are unsure how the justices will rule.
We don't know for sure what the United States Supreme Court is going to do, but we're very, very gratified that they listened.
A big question today, whether Prop 8 supporters even had the standing to bring this before the Supreme Court. That's a question that may not be answered anytime soon. A ruling is expected sometime in June. Ken and Julie?
David, what was it like for you witnessing today's arguments inside the courtroom?
Well, you could feel the energy in the courtroom, too, that the fact that this case has finally made its way here almost 10 years after the first same-sex marriage certificates were issued in San Francisco. At times, there were bursts of humor amongst the judges, bantering with the lawyers on either side. In one case, Justice Scalia made a joke about elderly citizens, whether they would be able to procreate and thus fall under this issue of marriage as a means or vehicle for procreation. But at other times, there was a lot of emotion. Justice Kennedy talked about the children of same-sex couples and how they were waiting to hear on how the court would rule on this and how it would affect their lives. Julie.
All right, David, thank you.
Joining us now to dissect all of this is UC Davis constitutional law professor Vic Amar. Vic, I know we're not going to know anything until June when they come out with their written decision, but trying to read the tea leaves early. Now, what do you have as a takeaway from this?
Well, I thought it was very important that a number of the justices asked a lot of questions about whether the sponsors to Prop 8 are valid parties and whether they are valid representatives of the voters of California. Because if there are 3 or 4 or 5 justices who think that the Prop 8 sponsors don't have standing, then the Supreme Court could very well end up not deciding on the merits, the big question of whether same-sex couples have a right to marriage or not. So I won't be at all surprised if that happens based on what was said before and what was said at the argument. I've been thinking this for a couple of years, and it was kind of confirmed from what I saw today.
So what you did see today by the questioning, does it tell you that they could rule in a more broader sense or a more narrow sense?
Well, if they decide the Prop 8 sponsors lack standing, that would be pretty narrow, because that would erase what the Ninth Circuit said. It would send the case back to the trial court. And the same-sex couples who filed suit, they would probably get their marriage license. In fact, I think they definitely would. But whether other folks and how much more broadly the ruling would have any effect is very complicated and open to question. I did not see a lot of justices, to be honest with you, who wanted to invalidate the laws prohibiting same-sex marriage throughout the United States. It's still possible. Oral argument can be very misleading. If you look at, for example, the Obamacare oral argument, no one would have predicted the outcome based on the oral argument. But if you're going by the oral argument, I didn't see a lot of support for a broad ruling in favor of same-sex marriage.
Okay, Vic, we're going to check back with you throughout the rest of this program and get some more insight. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Court observers say there are at least 5 possible outcomes when the justices announce their decision sometime in June. KTVU's Heather Holmes walks us through these scenarios and how they could affect more than just California.
1. The court could uphold the constitutionality of Proposition 8, allowing states to legally limit marriage as a union between one man and one woman. 2. The court could say that the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause does not allow states to discriminate against same-sex couples. A broad ruling such as this would affect the 41 states that currently ban same-sex marriage. 3. The court could sidestep the merits of same-sex marriage itself and decide that once a state has offered gay couples the same rights as heterosexual couples, such as in a domestic partnership, there is no justification for denying same-sex couples the status of marriage. This kind of ruling would affect the 8 states with civil union and domestic partnership laws, including California. They treat same-sex couples like heterosexual couples in all ways but one. 4. The justices could agree with the lower court's ruling that once a state has allowed same-sex couples to marry and given them all the rights of heterosexual couples, there is no legal justification for taking away that right, as Prop 8 did. Casting a ruling in this way would only affect California. And 5, the court could dismiss the appeal on grounds that the backers of Prop 8 do not have legal standing to challenge the lower court's ruling. In this scenario, the appellate court's ruling could be vacated on the same grounds, allowing the district court's ruling against Prop 8 to stand and marriages to begin here in California.
A recent national poll on the question of same-sex marriage shows just how much public opinion has shifted. The Washington Post poll finds 58% of Americans think it should be legal for gay and lesbian couples to marry. Just 36% of those polled think it should be illegal. You can see the dramatic reversal over the last decade. Back in 2003, the same poll found support for same-sex marriage at just 37% compared to 55%. The poll also finds support today is highest among young people, but it is growing in all demographics. Some call the tug of war over marriage the key civil rights struggle of our time.
The clash has been fought on many complicated fronts, but it all began 9 years ago right here in the Bay Area. It started here in San Francisco's gilded City Hall, where a band of government officials took the highly unusual step of challenging a law they were expected to enforce. February 12, 2004, then Mayor Gavin Newsom ordered the approval of marriage licenses to people of the same sex, cheering and angering many. Now, Lieutenant Governor Newsom says it started when he heard then-President George Bush's 2004 State of the Union address.
The president publicly said he supported a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage. All of a sudden, 2 days, 3 days later, there were lines outside of City Hall. I remember just driving almost to where we are, driving around the corner with my mouth dropped open saying, what the heck is going on here?
The next day, a Sacramento man named Randy Thomason of Campaign for California Families filed suit to stop the marriages.
Someone had to hold Gavin Newsom, who violated his oath and violated state law. Someone had to hold him accountable.
The battle was on. San Francisco City Attorney Dennis Herrera led the legal charge for San Francisco. He recalls giving his legal counsel to Newsom.
We put a whole team on it to look at it from every angle, and we came up with what we thought were fairly strong arguments.
The California Supreme Court quickly issued a cease and desist order to San Francisco, and then in August of the same year invalidated the same-sex marriages that had already taken place. But there were surprises ahead. San Francisco took another tactic. It argued the laws preventing gay marriage were a violation of the state constitution. And on May 15, 2008, the state Supreme Court agreed with city officials.
It's inevitable. This door's wide open now. It's gonna happen, whether you like it or not.
Marriages between same-sex couples began again in June 2008. But that November, California voters said they thought that was wrong and approved Proposition 8, making the marriages illegal. The state Supreme Court upheld a challenge to the new law, and the messy fight went on to the battlegrounds of federal courts, where the judges ruled Prop 8 unconstitutional. Last year, the United States Supreme Court agreed to hear the case and perhaps make a final decision whether it is legal to ban or approve marriage between people of the same sex. Okay, let's talk about Justice Kennedy. He's considered the swing vote. Any indication from today's questioning how he's leaning?
Well, first remember that oral argument can be misleading. If you looked at what he did in oral argument in Obamacare, it wouldn't have mapped on to how he voted. But if you're focusing on oral argument, he expressed discomfort over the court even having to take this case, which suggests to me that he might be inclined to decide narrowly and maybe on the standing grounds. On the merits, he did say things that were supportive both of the same-sex couples, talking about the children and the interests of them, but also on behalf of government that might want to proceed incrementally. He talked about 2,000 years of experience without same-sex marriage and 5 years with, that states can maybe take it slow.
So it seems like maybe he wants, do you think he wants more time in weighing this?
I think all the justices do not want to get dragged into this dispute. All of them realize the landscape is evolving so quickly that even 2 or 3 or 4 years might be a better backdrop against which to decide a major national question. So that's why maybe the standing issue or something like it may be attractive to a lot of them to buy some time.
An escape for them. All right. Thank you, Vic.
So to speak.
Thank you, Vic.
When our KTVU News special continues, we go in depth with the two sides and talk with two of the key players in the legal wrangling over same-sex marriage.
Milestone moment in history!
You're looking at live pictures right now from San Francisco outside California's Supreme Court building at Civic Center Plaza. Dozens of supporters of same-sex marriage are gathered there at this hour. They're holding a vigil on this historic day as the nation's highest court considers the constitutionality of California's marriage ban. Joining us from Washington, D.C. tonight, two men entrenched in this legal battle.
On the left, Dennis Herrera, city attorney for the city of San Francisco. Dennis has defended the city since those first marriage licenses were issued. And on the right, Andy Puno. He's the attorney for ProtectMarriage.com, which led the successful campaign for Prop 8 and has defended the initiative ever since. Andy, we begin with you. What's your takeaway after today's hearing?
Well, good evening. Today's hearing was a very welcome event for us. We really feel that we were able to get all of our arguments out that we wanted to address. We had good, thoughtful questions from the justices. And really, for the first time, we feel like we were in front of a fair tribunal. I mean, we've been up against a lot of obstacles in court in San Francisco and in the Ninth Circuit. And really, it was just gratifying to be in front of some very, very smart judges asking very good questions.
Now, Dennis, to you, your impressions of today's hearing.
Well, I have to say, after being involved in this battle for 9 years, and at least for the last 4 in federal court, making sure that we put discrimination on trial, it was incredibly gratifying to be before our nation's highest court and to see them question Mr. Cooper with respect to the motivations and the reasons behind why Prop 8 was proffered. It was very, very clear that Mr. Cooper had no meritorious arguments whatsoever to justify discrimination against our lesbian and gay brothers and sisters. And that was very gratifying to see that come out in our nation's highest court and be revealed for what it was.
Well, let's ask Andy about that. Andy, this is a constitutional question before the court. What is the single most powerful legal argument that you heard in court today on your side?
Well, I think one of the biggest arguments is that reasonable people can have different views of what marriage means and what marriage is for. And when that's the case, that's an issue that we leave to the people and the legislative branch, their elected representatives, and the democratic process. It's not something that we ask courts to intervene and substitute their judgment for the judgment of the people. And so I think that separation of powers concept, the idea that this is not something the courts should impose nationwide and end prematurely a debate that has been going on and should be allowed to run its course.
Dennis, same question, the strongest legal argument on your side of the case.
I couldn't agree more with what Andy just had to say about the separation of powers. We have a Constitution, and we have an equal protection clause to take out disfavored minorities from debates subject to the vagaries of political majorities that might want to discriminate against them. And we have said all along that there's absolutely no reason why Prop 8 should be judged to be constitutional, and it's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause because going back for over 100 years, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that marriage is a fundamental right. And I think that Ted Olson spoke eloquently and passionately about that today. And I was very gratified to see that he had the opportunity to put forth that argument, which we've had the opportunity to put forth for quite some time. And I think he did it magnificently and eloquently.
Dennis, this one to you. If the court issues a narrow ruling, something that, say, only affects California, are there other legal avenues to pursue?
Well, we, as you're aware, with our co-counsel, Ted Olson and David Boies, we put the full panoply of issues before the High Court. And while we fully support a broad 50-state ruling that subjects Prop 8 to heightened scrutiny, we made sure that we provided them with another option, a California-focused option. They ask questions about that, and obviously whatever decision they make and how they fashion it, whether it be an 8-state solution, as the Solicitor General has talked about, or a California-focused decision, or a broad ruling. The legal reasoning lying beyond that, equal protection, is fundamental to any of the remedies, regardless of how broad they might fashion it. So I'm not going to predict exactly how the Supreme Court is going to come out, but we think that the equal protection argument is strong and it's going to have vitality, not just in California, but across this country, whether it be in this case or another one.
Okay, Andy, your final response. Quick thought here.
Well, I think this has been a very long road, and your program earlier detailed the many years and many twists and turns that this case has taken. And I think it will be good for the initiative process and for the people's confidence in their system of government. Hopefully in June we'll have a ruling from the Supreme Court saying this is something that the court shouldn't impose on the people of California or the entire country, and that the democratic process should be allowed to work itself out. And that's where the debate belongs. And so that's what we look forward to in June.
Andy Puño, Dennis Herrera, live in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Well, outside the Supreme Court today, the two couples named in the lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Prop 8 spoke about love and family. One couple, Kristen Perry and Sandy Steer from Berkeley, have been together for 13 years and have raised 4 boys, including twin 18-year-olds. Today, the two women said equality under the law is the core issue in this case.
I believe in love. And Proposition 8 is a discriminatory law that hurts people. It hurts gays and lesbians in California, and it hurts the children we're raising, and it does so for no good reason.
I just want to say how incredibly proud we are of our parents. We love them, we love our family, and we look forward to the day when we will be treated equally, just like our neighbors' families.
Would it not? Yes.
Steer and their attorneys said they are thrilled to get the opportunity to bring this case to the Supreme Court.
Dozens of briefs have been filed on both sides of this issue because the court's ruling could extend beyond California and affect every state in the country. Defending Prop 8 are churches and faith-based organizations, including the Mormon Church and U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, who argue same-sex marriage is an infringement on their freedom of religion, which opposes same-sex marriage. Public interest groups argue Prop 8 should stand because it's what the people voted for. Family groups say Prop 8 protects children through traditional marriage. Now, as we look on, even some conservatives say Prop 8 should be overturned. Prominent Republicans, including Meg Whitman, the HP leader, former New Jersey Governor Christy Todd Whitman, and Clint Eastwood, they have all joined more than 100 other Republicans who support same-sex marriage. Although there are 41 states that are also involved in this case, only 20 of them have filed briefs defending the ban. And there's a growing list of companies supporting same-sex marriage, saying it's good for business. The Bay Area firms on that list include Clorox, Google, Facebook, Levi's, and Hewlett-Packard.
Now, tomorrow, the High Court considers the federal definition of marriage.
I'd like to, legally get married where I'm recognized through all 50 states.
The Defense of Marriage Act and why the justices may take a different approach. Tomorrow, the court considers a different question, the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, and whether the federal law defining marriage as between one man and one woman is constitutional. KTVU's David Stevenson joins us once again from Washington, D.C. with why the arguments on DOMA, as it's called, are about much more than marriage. David.
Julie, for some same-sex couples, the debate over DOMA is about marriage equality and economic justice.
How was your day today? It was good. I mean, we're so busy.
They've been a couple for 23 years and married for 5. But Lauren Scoff and Eric Severson say they've been denied the same benefits given to heterosexual couples for far too long.
It's just a matter of time before there's full equality.
The Defense of Marriage Act, signed into law by President Clinton in 1996, defines marriage as between a man and a woman. It bars the nation's estimated 114,000 same-sex married couples from enjoying many federal benefits, such as filing joint income taxes and Social Security for surviving spouses.
That's amounted to over $10,000 in additional tax liability for us just in the last 13 years, just for medical benefits.
Same-sex marriage has gone from being a primary wedge issue politically to really being something that is less vigorously debated now.
The Obama administration is now declining to defend DOMA, and legal analysts say shifting public attitudes have left DOMA supporters hard-pressed to prove gay marriage harms heterosexual unions.
People don't want their neighbors, Mary and Jane, not to be able to have the same rights as they may enjoy. So I think humanization is a big part of it.
If DOMA is overturned, Eric Severson and Lauren Scoff say they may celebrate with another wedding ceremony.
I'd like to, legally get married where I'm recognized through all 50 states, where I can go anywhere and be recognized for a change.
And we will bring you a live report outside the Supreme Court and inside tomorrow morning at 5:15 a.m. here on Channel 2. For now, reporting live in Washington, D.C., David Stevenson, KTVU, Channel 2 News.
Professor, a final thought on DOMA.
Well, DOMA is a little different than Prop 8 in the following sense. The court, if it wanted to, can strike down DOMA without touching the 40 states that prohibit same-sex marriage right now by simply saying that states can do what they want, but the federal government has to follow the wishes of each state. That might bother states' rights peoples much less than if they invalidate Prop 8 and all the other bans on same-sex marriage.
All right. Vic, thanks so much for coming in tonight. We
pleasure.
Appreciate it. And coming up tonight on the 10 o'clock news, more on the vigil happening right now outside the state Supreme Court in San Francisco.
Plus, continuing coverage in 90 seconds with Gassia Mikhailian on Bay Area News at 7 on TV 36. We'll see you tonight at 10 o'clock.